Welcome to the Human Frame podcast.
With me, Łucja Hawking. Today I'm joined by Homira May. Homira is a Hazara rights activist, scientist, and experienced researcher working in business and pharmaceutical industry, as well as a human rights defender from Afghanistan. In 2025, she received logistical support from the Window for Women's Human Rights Defenders to participate in a series of interactive dialogues and advocacy meetings on Afghanistan during the 58th and 59th sessions of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me for this program and the amazing work that you do.
I'm just going to go straight into the questions that I would love to talk to you about. So firstly, with your lived experience and beginnings of advocacy, could you tell me more about your personal journey from your upbringing under the Taliban to your current advocacy as a Hazara women activist?
So I grew up in Afghanistan during the first Taliban regime, and as you may already know, that just like this time in previous regime, they also didn't allow girls to go get education. So as a result, almost all schools around Afghanistan were closed for girls, and I didn't start my primary education until there was an intervention by America and NATO was in Afghanistan, and I was one of those girls with the UNICEF backpack and a UNICEF pen going to school starting quite late. And having that lived experience during the first Taliban regime, I understand the importance of education and what it means to live under such a regime where there are mass human rights violations everywhere, especially for women and girls in Afghanistan, where they have taken their fundamental human rights from the rights to education, the rights to work, the rights to public life, the rights to be able to travel. Like if you think of any aspect of women's life in Afghanistan, she is not allowed to do. One of the most recent ridiculous edict that they had was that women, when walking outside, don't have to use both of their eyes. They have to cover one of them, and the other one can only be used to see where they're going there, and they shouldn't be looking on their surroundings. So all of these edicts and all of these human rights atrocities that we see and experience in Afghanistan have sort of led me to use any platform possible, any platform or opportunities that are given to me to ensure that the voice of women in Afghanistan are not silenced. And in particular, the Hazara woman, having been, myself being a Hazara from Afghanistan, growing up during the first Taliban regime, our fear was very different. Our fight was survival, as it is now. While a lot of other women in Kabul were fighting for their right to education, the right to work, Hazara women were fighting for their survival. They want to fight for the right to remain in their own homes due to forced displacement. They wanted to protect their children because there were massacres happening across Afghanistan during the first Taliban regime. And because I know what that's like, and I have seen it and experienced it as a kid growing up, I want to ensure that any opportunity that's given to me, that I speak up against the Taliban and the human rights violations they're committing.
Thanks for sharing that and giving us a more deeper insight into it. For those people that might not know, what is being a Hazara? What does that kind of entail?
So Hazaras are an ethnic group in Afghanistan, indigenous to Afghanistan and Central Asia. We once made up more than 67% of Afghanistan's population, but due to internal colonization by sort of armies and dynasties and the whole project to basically nation building of Afghanistan led to a huge massacre and genocide of the Hazara people. So in the 1890s, more than 62% of Hazara population were massacred. Hazara women and children were sold as slaves, and Hazaras didn't actually have their constitutional rights up until 2004 or 2001 post America invasion to Afghanistan. So we are a ethnic group, a religious minority in Afghanistan, one of the largest ethnic group who have been persecuted throughout the modern day history of Afghanistan, sold as slaves. And when the Taliban came to power, Taliban belonging to the dominant ethnic group, they had this huge aggressive campaign to drive Hazaras out of Afghanistan, to drive Hazaras out of their native lands to the mountains, to areas where living is a lot harsher. And they had this slogan that they used to go, Tajiks to Tajikistan. Tajiks are an ethnic group in Afghanistan, and Tajikistan being another country. Uzbeks to Uzbekistan, and Hazaras to Goristan, and Goristan means graveyard. So they wanted to clean Afghanistan from Hazaras. They wanted to clean Hazaras out of Afghanistan. And because of that, we know what Taliban are capable of, and we know how extreme their ideologies are around Hazaras.
And it's only, from what I've seen from news, it's only getting worse and worse and worse and worse within Afghanistan anyway. How did you also get your education?
I came to this country at the age of 13, couldn't speak a word of English, but I knew the value of education, and I knew what it meant, as a woman fighting for education in Afghanistan. I grabbed onto that opportunity. And so I went to the whole process of going to school, learning English, has about 4 years from year 8 to year 11 to learn English and catch up and get all of my GCSEs, and then say get on the right track of getting into education. And then I just went on from there to study biomedical science. After that, I did my master's in stem cells and regenerative medicine, worked for a little bit, and then I realized that actually, there's opportunity to get a PhD. So I went ahead and did a PhD on medical science. And again, the reason why I did research on medical science, because I'm passionate about women's health, and second, because I saw a lot of women dying from pregnancy complications in Afghanistan. One, due to the lack of access to very basic healthcare, but also because the maternal health, not just in Afghanistan, but actually in the UK as well, is not quite well understood. So for me, it was, I think it was an honor to be able to do a project where it could potentially save millions of lives.
I mean, that's incredible to kind of just see that dedication. I mean, I relate very similarly to, not being able to speak English and coming over here and learning English and sounding absolutely fluent, which is great. But I think also using it from seeing, I think it makes people a lot more, dedicated to doing what they want to do, and just shows also when you kind of flee from areas of persecution as well, it's because you want to do it, you want a further life. And, a lot of people do that. And I think, showcasing how people use it for the greater good and aren't just using resources how, people normally see it as, is incredible, because you see what you don't have, and people take for granted what they do have in a country when then they have all the rights that they do have. And then just moving on to more about understanding gender apartheid. And I've known, because I've listened to you speak on several different panels on this, because you've described, and a huge number of Afghanistan activists have described the Taliban's actions as gender apartheid. So what does that term actually mean to you personally, and more on an international recognition as well?
So gender apartheid, we know what apartheid is. Gender apartheid is where women or a group of people are being systematically segregated due to their gender. In Afghanistan, Taliban being in power, Taliban being in control of Afghanistan, they have systematically erased women from public life. It is not a case of like a couple of women here, a couple of women there, but it's in the entire country. Not a single woman in Afghanistan are allowed to work within the government, to be a police, to go and get education. Universities are closed. So it's that systematic erasure of women from public life and segregating them to just imprisoning them essentially in their virtual homes or virtual prisons in their homes. Unfortunately, not fine under international law. And so women of Afghanistan are now driving this campaign to codify gender apartheid under international law. And what this essentially means is that you can persecute perpetrators who commit this crime. And this is a huge legal gap, I think, in terms of accountability worldwide. And if it does get codified under international law, then not only in Afghanistan, but anywhere else in the world, you can have accountability, you can hold perpetrators accountable where gender persecution take place.
Can you take me through the steps of how they kind of took it further and further and further? Because I know at first women couldn't leave without the male escort or male relative, and then it kind of escalated more and more and more into not being able to speak, and then not even being able to look outside your own window.
So when Taliban took control of Afghanistan, I think it was an absolute crisis and a chaos, and a lot of people left Afghanistan. But grassroots or activist human rights defenders remained in Afghanistan because they wanted to fight for the future generation of women. A lot of politicians left but it was the human rights defenders that remained on the streets of Kabul, on the streets of Herat, protesting and fighting for their rights. And Taliban started to, and not even slowly, but aggressively, giving edicts to erase women and to restrict their rights. And it started again from harsh treatment of women who were traveling alone, women who, in their opinion, were not dressed properly under Sharia law, would get imprisoned, tortured. And then they publicly started to these edicts where then they were, not allowed to go to school. Then schools started to disappear, like they get closed, and then universities, and then finally they even closed the healthcare or medical institutions for women as well, because for a couple of months women were allowed to study midwifery, they were allowed to study dentistry, medicine, and so on, but then they closed that for women as well. And then following that, they had other ridiculous edicts, such as women are not allowed to go to parks, women are not allowed to go walking, women are not allowed to do this and that, women are not allowed to wear lipstick, women are not allowed to have their curtains open, women are not allowed to speak to other adult females. So it just started to come one after the other, and now it's, I think, more than 130 edicts specifically for women to restrict them from every aspect of their lives.
And I think it's also really important to kind of, for people listening, to understand also it starts very small and it just escalates further and further and further until, like you said, it becomes an apartheid, for example, or in other areas it might become a genocide. It depends, but it starts very small, such as not being able to go to school, and escalates even further. And I think what you said with the international perspective is really important, is if you catch it at the beginning, then you prevent all of the atrocities from happening. But then the issue with that is, as we all really painfully know, is, there is no crime unless all the other things do happen. So we're kind of caught in a kind of, well, we want to prevent it, but then we can't criminalize it, or all these kind of aspects. So I think it's such an important thing to just catch it early. And so you prevent all these different lives and being absolutely ruined. In your view, specifically, how would legally codifying gender apartheid as a crime against humanity change the global response to women suffering in Afghanistan?
It would, again, we're bringing accountability. The culture of impunity in Afghanistan has continued since modern day history, and that has allowed all of these perpetrators to commit atrocity after atrocity without even a hint of fear that they're going to be persecuted. And Taliban are committing all of these crimes. And what is interesting as well is that when it comes to violation against women's rights, they very publicly and very proudly admits to it and say, yes, this is what we're doing, this is under Sharia law, and they sort of cover it under Sharia law and their culture. But as you know, Afghanistan is a very diverse country, and like their culture is not every community's culture in Afghanistan. As a Hazara, that's not my culture. As a lot of other ethnic groups in Afghanistan, that's not their culture. We've always sent our girls to school. When our own history as a Hazara, we had women's rights in Afghanistan way before a woman's right was a thing. So a lot of writers who published their journals and historians and explorers that went to Afghanistan that interacted with Hazara community, one of the things that they sort of observed was the equality between men and women in Afghanistan. So we have that innate value of gender equality in our community, and they're coming in and exposing extreme ideologies onto us. And what it would do is to bring in accountability. We'll be able to persecute Taliban leaders under this crime. The ICC have 2 arrest warrants against Taliban leaders, which is I think, fantastic work, and it's great progress, but it's not enough. And I think international community need to stand united against Taliban to push for the codification of gender apartheid, to persecute Taliban leaders for this crime, for gender apartheid. It's not just gender persecution. Gender persecution is basically persecuting someone based on the gender. This is gender apartheid. This is segregating the entire female population because of their gender.
And also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember some people saying that, when other international politicians or people checking on women in Afghanistan are happy with the situation happening, the Taliban just bring in men or women that support their cause to illustrate that it's everyone's happy with the situation. But obviously we know that not to be the case, because it's a way that oppressors use the tactics that they use. So
yeah, freedom of expression in Afghanistan doesn't exist. They are persecuting journalists, torturing journalists, imprisoning journalists, anybody who takes the real story out of Afghanistan. They're getting persecuted. So there is no way for anyone to be able to go to Afghanistan, especially international journalists who have previously spoken up or written about human rights violations in Afghanistan. They don't get permission to enter Afghanistan. The special rapporteur, UN special rapporteur, is not allowed to go into Afghanistan because of his reports. So of course Taliban are going to be bringing in their own supporters to, or whether it's under coerce, whether they genuinely believe their ideologies, but they don't a lot of these people who visit Afghanistan, they don't speak to women. When women are not allowed to go outside without a man, when a woman is not allowed to speak to someone who's not related to them, how do you have access to women who are suffering under their rule? How do you have access to women who are suffering from gender apartheid in Afghanistan when the woman is not allowed to go to outside? The woman is not even allowed to open their curtains. Women are not allowed to look at their surrounding. So of course they're going to be bringing in people who is either aligned to their ideology or coerce them into promoting and into representing the Taliban. And I mean, I've seen this everywhere. In when we had the Doha process, one of Taliban's condition was that they should only bring in people who will not speak about the violation, and they were restricting women and civil society organizations to be involved in the Doha process. So we can see that they are scared of women in Afghanistan. They are scared of civil society and the presence of civil society in Afghanistan. They have eliminated civil society in Afghanistan. Civil society organizations don't exist. There's very few that do exist and operate, are all underground and operating in secret. So when politicians do go to Afghanistan and they come back saying everybody's happy, for me it's ridiculous. It's horrifying that they believe the words of a terrorist organization. They are still terrorist groups and classified as terrorists by many organizations and by many countries, and they come and say, oh yeah, everything is perfect, women are happy with not having any rights. Like, what century do we live in? Honestly, what century do we live in?
No, I completely, and this might be a bad analogy, but it's something. It reminds me of, when Nazis brought in people, the Red Cross and all that, into camps to show how everyone was really happy living in ghettos, for example. And we all know that is an absolute ridiculous claim, and they were doing it as a show in order to justify what they're doing at the time. But then, as we know, a couple of years went by and we saw the crimes and the horrible atrocities. So again, it's kind of, why can't we learn from, we all know that the perpetrators use these tactics. So why do we, as I say we, I mean politicians and, countries in general, don't do more about it? You've spoken a lot about how certain groups, especially women, Hazara, LGBT and disabled people, are the first to be abandoned when support disappears. So how do overlapping identities multiply the risks these communities face?
Well, Afghanistan's social dynamic, I think, is probably one of the most challenging one and the most complex one in the world. A lot of marginalized communities have historically been abandoned or historically been sidelined from discourse on Afghanistan. So we've only had the dominant group's narrative that have led entire decision of Afghanistan, international communities' interaction in Afghanistan. So, we've had Hazaras, in particular Hazara women, who've always been marginalized and sidelined from all of the discourse and conversation dialogues around Afghanistan, decision-making around Afghanistan. And the little support and, let's say, humanitarian fund that was given to Afghanistan, a very, very, very small percentage of that would go to these groups. Because especially women's issues in Afghanistan, became a market. And you've had a very small percentage of elites who both acted as politicians, NGO owners, and civil society, had the largest share of this market. And so they were the ones who were taking the grants and the projects, implementing it, and had the least understanding of the social, cultural dynamic in Afghanistan. So they would take these projects, $1 million projects, and have a solution for, sort of one solution fit all approach to entire Afghanistan, which of course wasn't sustainable, didn't work, couldn't implement it everywhere because, like I said, Afghanistan is a very diverse country. You can't have one strategy for central Afghanistan and as well as south Afghanistan. There are two different communities, two different religions, two different languages, two different approaches to how their lives, liberalism, conservatism, all of that. So it didn't work. And when this support sort of ended, the first people to suffer were the LGBTQ communities, were the Hazaras, were the religious minorities, because they're the first one to get abandoned, as that very little support remains, as those very small percentage of it continues to have the largest share of this market. So diversification of support, fund, projects, and empowering people and supporting grassroots organization and local organization has never been so important in Afghanistan, because the past 20 years, there's a term among Afghans that in Afghanistan, it rained money and the money went to Middle East. Because a lot of people, politicians, took the money, did invest in Afghanistan, bought a lot of real estate and projects and companies in Middle East, and that's where they're thriving. Or the local people, the people who are most in need, continue to suffer inside of Afghanistan. So diversification and empowering people and local organization is incredibly important, because you're continuing to support these people and the problems that they face, and because these are the people that, these problems are closest to their hearts, so they know the solutions for their problems. Someone sitting in Kabul trying to solve a solution in southern Afghanistan is not going to work, because they don't have that cultural sensitivities and the cultural understanding of that area.
Completely. And from that, what are people in Afghanistan, like you said, activists, how are they trying to help those minorities?
Well, activists as a large, let's sort of call it the Afghan activists, unfortunately not a lot, because when you bring in intersectionality into discussions, a lot of people find it too difficult, too uncomfortable, too sensitive, too dividing, and even international community are under this understanding that it's going to cause more problem. So even Hazara activists themselves, and I can speak for myself as well, at the start, I had this fear that I shouldn't be talking about Hazara genocide because it made other people feel uncomfortable. And as a result, I was under attack, harassment, bullying, and X, Y, and Z. So a lot of people stay away from speaking about particular persecution, Hazara genocide, religious persecution, because in Afghanistan, it's too uncomfortable. And again, this conversation has sort of stopped, because the moment you talk about intersectionality, you're diversifying the funds and you're diversifying the support. So the dominant narrative is that everyone suffers, the whole narrative that all lives matter in Afghanistan, the same in Afghanistan, that we all suffer. Everyone is the same, and they don't want to bring in intersectionality. So it's been incredibly difficult to have this conversation within the context of Afghanistan as well as internationally.
From the outside of Afghanistan perspective, how can international solidarity be better centered if we, show and split resources within the marginalized voices within Afghanistan, not just visible ones that we kind of see all the time? Is there anything that individuals can do as well?
I think to give the power back to the individual and the communities for their own narrative. So when you want to know about a Hazara community, bring in a Hazara from that community to speak about their challenges, their stories, their experiences, and their proposal to how we can fix the solution. It's sometimes ridiculous that I see these panel discussions talking about minorities, not a single minority is present in that panel discussion. So giving back the power and the voice to their own people and allow them to speak. And when it comes to supporting and whether it's through funding, whether it's through being an ally, is to really do their research about the sensitivities in Afghanistan and the human rights violation and the complexity around it. And in the past, I'd say 2 years, we've had great allies of the Hazaras who've joined the Stop Hazara Genocide campaign. Has been fantastic in supporting us. And that the most successful support that I've seen is that empowering the community to take control over the narrative, over the stories, and to be able to tell the stories from their own voice.
And how can people support your Stop Hazara Genocide campaign?
Write to MPs, write to politicians, let them know that this is happening. Let them know that you're an ally of the Hazaras and you want to stop atrocities. You are a human rights defender and that you care about minorities and religious groups and those vulnerable communities that are at the hardest times, experience the hardest times in their lives, is to engage. I mean, the Stop Hazara Genocide is a continuous sort of campaign that goes on online, especially on X/Twitter, and to follow. A lot of the times when atrocities is committed against the Hazaras, the Hazara community uses that Stop Hazara Genocide campaign to let people know. So follow the campaign, retweet, get in touch with your politician, political representatives, and just let them know this is what's happening.
Because these small acts are the things that build. Like we said, as it works for perpetrators, it also works for those defending human rights as well. As you start small and it builds bigger and bigger and bigger. So do write to your MP if well, no, not even if, do write to your MP. I want to talk more about documenting storytelling and resistance as well. So through the Bolak Analyst Network, atrocities have been documented like bombings and disappearances. So how do you think documenting these stories become an act of resistance, and can it sustain hope as well?
This documentation is what's going to help us when there is accountability. At Bolak Analyst Network, it's a voluntary-driven organization. Even those inside of Afghanistan, the colleagues that are working inside of Afghanistan risk their lives, literally risk their lives, traveling from province to province, district to district, collecting this data, confirming the identity of the victims, documenting these atrocities. And that is because they understand the value of documentation. They understand the value of data. They understand because they themselves have experienced atrocities that's been committed against the community. So they are risking their lives, staying inside of Afghanistan, collecting this data and documenting to ensure that one day these perpetrators be held accountable for the atrocities they've committed. And for me, like when I see these colleagues inside of Afghanistan risk their lives to do this, and you sort of feel it in your bones how much these people have suffered when individuals like them risk their lives to ensure that a bit of data is collected, a bit of data is reserved. So hopefully one day that we can take the Taliban to court, and hopefully one day this data can be useful.
Exactly, because there's different, I think even at the Human Rights Defenders course that we went on, there was a specific app that documented especially what time, where it was, what weapons it was, and that will then be able to be used. And it appears as a camera on your phone, doesn't it? So it doesn't look like you're documenting something. So if the Taliban do catch you, it doesn't look like you've been documented, because obviously you're risking your life and you could end up getting killed for documenting these atrocities. So with all these things that happen, it's very difficult because you're risking your life and you probably won't be able to see the end result of Taliban maybe, or criminalized. I don't really know what the term is in that sense. That's big enough for the atrocities that they've committed. But it does possibly give a hope to future generations so that they could at least live in a free Afghanistan. And also in co-leading the Stop Hazara Genocide campaign, what surprising or moving experiences stand out for you, either in activism spaces or personal moments of solidarity as well?
Stop Hazara Genocide campaign itself has been going on for a long time, but we, as a group of human rights defenders, led this in October 2022 when an education center in Kabul was attacked, killing more than 52 girls who were preparing for their university entrance exam. And as a result, we had over 120 cities organizing protests across the world, from Africa to Asia, Canada, Australia. And we had over 20 million hashtags on Twitter/X. And that was the moment that I realized the power of individuals coming together, the power of grassroots, sort of people's movements. And that was when there was a lot more dialogue and conversations and discussions, panel discussions on Hazara genocide, from United Nations to European Parliament to UK Parliament and across different governments. And what was, again, really, for me, that was sort of refreshing and I guess in a way gave me a sense of hope, was the increase of our allies within the sort of international community / individuals who, like yourself and others, who got to know about the cause, who would be reaching out, asking, how can we help? What can we do? This is my organization. We work within the human rights sector. How is it that we can help? And that was, again, that we saw that because people started to talk about it. They started, appearing on news, and people getting a glimpse of the campaign, and they started reaching out. And for me, that was a moment that I realized actually that the importance of activism and the importance of, and again, the power of people coming together that can, not necessarily make a difference overnight, but actually drive something.
Definitely. And I think, going to the different conferences and hearing all the different aspects of women, whether it's journalists, whether it's activists, whether it's doctors or lawyers that have escaped and are able to still campaign outside, is also incredible to hear from my perspective anyway. And obviously there's a lot of cost and emotional toll with all of this. So you've described the overwhelming cost of abandonment and what that is and how women are left with just willpower. So what does that look like on the ground, and where do you find resilience during those darkest moments?
So I work with an organization called Education Bridge for Afghanistan, where we have developed a low bandwidth software where it's like sort of AI-driven self-learning platform for a lot of students, also for schools as a platform to be able to teach their students online. Majority of our students, 95% of our students, are girls from grade 7 to 12. And in that, we've had many cases of girls wanting to commit suicides and our teachers having to step up and prevent that. And that is the cost of the abandonment that we see, where girls on a daily basis are committing suicide across Afghanistan because they don't see any bright future for them. The cost of abandonment that we see little girls in Afghanistan having their first menstrual cycle after marriage. Right. The cost of abandonment by international community is women human rights defenders are having to give up their passion and marry into a family that potentially be abusive, and to give up the hope that they had for the future and the children's future. And we see that in Afghanistan, there are less and less women resisting, because after 4 or 5 years, we haven't seen any progress with the international community. We haven't seen any progress with the Taliban. And so they are feeling completely helpless. Saying that, of course, we also see the continuous resistance of women inside of Afghanistan still, and they're still fighting.
What's the age that girls get married off at? What is the minimal age?
We have seen as young as toddlers being promised to an adult man. We have seen cases of that marriage. We've seen girls being sold because their family are so poor and in poverty. Girls who had one case of a girl who was 9 years old married to a 60-year-old man. These are just examples. The reality is a lot worse.
And the thing is also, it's looking at that these are, they should be protected. This, when a family's desperate, it's another thing. And when it's just horrible, it's literally heartbreaking to hear. And actually, seeing it as well is another thing, because that happening in the UK would not stand. If that makes it, there would be a massive turmoil over it. People would be, I don't know, protesting on the streets whilst, that's not allowed. Because with all of this as well, it's very, hard to hear and very emotional. So how do you also protect your own well-being whilst bearing witness to such intense suffering, both as a researcher and from your human rights defense?
I think a lot of us suffer from survivor's guilt. So I have this conversation with a lot of other colleagues who are having more severe form of emotional, I'd say, challenges that they face because of the type of work that they do. And we have this conversation all the time, and it's the survivor's guilt that we feel so guilty for surviving that, and we feel guilty for living in a country where we have the rights, we have the comfort home, we have the opportunity to do whatever we want. And so it's the drive, I guess, that keeps us going. It's the sort of trying to, for me personally, trying to separate all of that and not process it emotionally. But of course it is hard when you see these cases, when you see pictures of little girls getting married to 60-year-old men, or when you see dead bodies being found, and you have to process that, and you have to document it, and you have to talk about it. But it's the fact that we have experienced the atrocities of the Taliban, and the idea of breaking down, or the idea of not talking about it, the idea of not fighting, is not an option for us. So I guess a lot of times I tell myself, suck it up and continue. But emotionally and physically, I know it's not healthy, but just giving up is not an option.
But it's what keeps you going as well, is like you said, looking at those images. I mean, I would keep anyone going, to be honest, to be able to help. And maybe that girl, but maybe many girls that are very similar. And I think the other really important thing is, putting way more strain on the international community as well to do their bit, because it shouldn't just stand on you guys. It's the whole world has to stand up in order to do this. So with international funding retracting as well, as in many different areas, and many women being blurred into silence, what does meaningful solidarity look like beyond just verbal support? Because that only goes so, I mean, it helps you maybe mental health wise, but you need more than just that.
Solidarity needs to be for the women of Afghanistan. It's taking concrete action to put pressure on the Taliban. When we are sending humanitarian aid, there needs to be a better monitoring system in place, because it should not be going to the Taliban's pockets, and you should not allow more atrocities to take place. As individuals it's our tax money that are being sent to Afghanistan. It is our responsibility to make sure that it's spent properly and not empower the Taliban to commit more atrocities. So even if you are just a normal person working 9-to-5 job, paying your taxes on time, essentially it is your responsibility to hold your government accountable for the tax money that's being sent to Afghanistan. Your tax money being sent to Afghanistan, where's the monitoring? Where is it going? Where did it get spent? Because every week, a large sum of that humanitarian aid that's meant to be going to the people of Afghanistan ends up in the wrong pockets. So we need to, as individuals, that is our responsibility to hold our governments accountable. As international community, as governments and human rights organizations, it's ensuring that we take concrete action to protect the women of Afghanistan, to prevent genocide, and to ensure that we center the voices of the most marginalized communities.
That's also a really interesting thing that I've not heard as well, with me saying it is us ultimately, no matter who you are, what you do, what work you do, you are involved. Because like you said, it's taxpayers' money. So where do you want it to go exactly? And if you want to make sure that goes in the right direction, then act. So what messages do you have for activists, listeners, or policymakers wanting to take concrete action right now? I know we've mentioned it already, but just to drill it in even more.
For activists, be an ally to women of Afghanistan, be an ally to Hazara women, be an ally to Hazara people who are experiencing genocide, women of Afghanistan experiencing gender apartheid, living under gender apartheid, and to ensure that you empower them, take control of their voice and their narrative. The international community and policymakers is to listen to the people of Afghanistan, and not just the most dominant narrative that sort of you've surrounded yourself for over 40-50 years, but to actually diversify those voices, those expertise, and to be true representative of Afghanistan and the diversity that it represents, and to put pressure on the Taliban, and to listen to the people of Afghanistan and the sort of political landscape that they want, and to support the civil society organization, to support human rights defenders, human rights defenders can't, they need support, whether it's institutional support, whether it's training, it's capacity building, any form of support right now is going to make such a huge difference to the human rights defenders from Afghanistan.
And just to end this on a more hopeful, positive frame, I mean, I hope it does happen within our lifetimes as well, but potentially even sooner. But if justice is realised, both for Hazara women, and actually, no, I'm going to rephrase that, not if, when justice is realised for Hazara women and all women in Afghanistan, what does the future look like for them and for you also?
The future, when justice is served, of course, in an ideal world, we get rid of the culture of impunity in Afghanistan. We held the perpetrators who are making women of Afghanistan live under gender apartheid accountable, and they are evicted, imprisoned, and pay for the crimes that they've committed. And women and girls, as well as Hazaras in Afghanistan, have been empowered to take control of their own lives, of their own communities. Political landscape is no longer centralized. Its power is given back to the people to govern themselves, to make decisions for themselves. And that hopefully each community, each religion, each ethnic group is able to make the decisions for themselves, whether it's to go to school or not go to school. Again, it's up to the community. If it's their culture, it's their culture, but not superimpose their own ideologies or my ideologies on other people, but actually to work on each community, each ethnic group, each culture, and to progress that way.
Thank you so much for this amazing talk. I've learned so much more than I already knew. It's always great speaking with you.
Thank you so much.